Yes.
What is spiritual shame?
Spiritual shame, well, you can't quite explain it, but it's the feeling that I am. Well, let's say for the time being, that for us, in order to understand it as non-spiritual shame, it's a defect in my ego. It's the feeling of this being despicable, loathsome. This is the feeling of shame, but it's not spiritual. Spiritual, that would already be a calculation of in order to bestow. It's a very special calculation.
But you can take an example from corporeal shame.
From the corporeal shame, you can only take the results. That just like corporeal shame burns me and I can't do anything, I will do anything in order to get rid of this feeling, right? The spiritual shame also burns me, and I will do everything not in order to get rid of this feeling, no, but in order to reach the opposite form of of how this shame comes to me. That is, let's say, if with corporeal shame I stole something and I discovered I'm a thief, then I kind of eat myself up. How come they discovered me? How come I'm not so successful? So with spiritual shame, the fact that it was revealed that I'm a thief, what is important for me is to invert myself to the opposite. That is, not to steal, but to give. And to that extent, to make up for what I did. And it's always revealed that I'm a thief and that I'm a criminal. And I always go and correct myself.
Even if nobody discovered it, you can feel shame. Even if nobody discovered that I stole, I can still feel shame.
Yes, the most important is that you discover it. Yes, what's important is that you discover it. It's not necessarily with respect to others. It's just an example from this world.
We said that the difference between Aleph and Dalet is that in Dalet, the Kli, the created being, decides to receive, opposite to Aleph, where the light enters not of that discernment's wish. But the moment where Aleph feels the difference between the emanator and the will receive, it decides to empty itself out of the light. It's the very same act as in Dalet, where you have the shame.
Well, wait a minute. We're talking here about actions. How can I put that? First of all, in each action, there is a reason why I drew here that in each phase you have the previous phases. So, first of all, you have to cancel the root that causes you undesirable development. You have to correct that. You, first of all, go and respond to it. So first of all, of course, there is a restriction, tzimtzum. After the restriction, where you're no longer under the fulfillment and under the light that fills you up, only after that you can now begin to feel what to do, that you are free. You're not being filled up with pleasure now, rather you're seemingly standing outside of it. However, you have a reshimo, this memory or recollection that you received and that you were full and you were empty. And what can you do now? So now you decide that here I can receive in order to bestow, etc., etc., meaning to give back to the host, to be similar to the host. And then you don't hate the feeling of shame, rather you begin to love the feeling of shame. You begin to use it correctly. You respect it. You are grateful to the emanator who disclosed in you such a feeling, because it helps you to be the created being, opposite of him, and out of that to reach equivalence of form. So there are many actions here, many scrutinies, and they occur after you are emptied. So Tzimtzum Aleph, it's a must. In Tzimtzum Aleph, it only thinks about the restriction. I have to get rid of it. I can't suffer it. Only according to my will to receive, I can't suffer such a form of reception. It humiliates me. It erases the pleasure from me. It erases the pleasure. I'm better off dead. There is life, and suddenly I feel death in it. I don't want that. After doing that, as I always said, we have 4 phases in each and every kind of development. Without that, it's impossible. So then it turns out that it decides next. It decides next, meaning it does a revision, re-examination of what happened to me, what for, why, what do I want, what's worthwhile. Then it reaches a state where it feels the shame, as I said. Then it changes its relation to the emanator. Not that it curses the situation, rather specifically the opposite. It appreciates that state where it feels shame. It starts to kiss the stick. Why? Because this can elevate him. It can be an opportunity to rise to the degree of the emanator, to come closer to him according to equivalence of form. Equivalence of form is according to the intention. The intention is not the desire. It is what rides over the desire. So look what's happening here in Bechinat Dalet. All of our work that we are later going to do, now in this Bechinat Dalet, it is all founded. It's, regarding everything. Why should I make restrictions? And how can I respond? How can I equalize my form with the emanator? He is now building the Rosh, the head of all of the degrees, from above downwards. The entire process. So I am now going and doing as much as I can in all of these different Pchinot, Dalet, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Daled, I'm going to receive. However, this reception should be as bestowal, because I don't have the possibility not to receive if I want to bestow. I can stay restricted, but if it's restricted, it will be even more egoistic, because I'm not delighting the emanator. How can I do that? Then it understands that if it's for the emanator, I have to receive. But for myself, I can't get rid of it because of the shame. Thanks to the shame, I now build my attitude toward him according to how he is toward me. And that way, we come to equivalence through Tzimtzum, Masach, or Chozer, and Partzuf. Restriction, screen, reflected light, and the Partzuf. So, what is now kind of being cooked in Bechina Dalet, the Dalet of the Dalet, is that it decides about the entire process, all the way to the end. This is why, from each and every action, we go back and raise man to this Bechina Dalet, and it's as if you come with another coin to this box, saving box. What do you call that? To this kind of petty cash box, and I throw another coin there and another coin. This is where it is all accumulated, because it decided about decides about the entire process, and this is how it is in each and every state. This is where it brings up its coin, its penny. Not clear?
I want to be precise about the question. I asked about the difference between Aleph and Dalet, because in Aleph, it seems that at the end of Aleph, there's that same feeling of, we don't call it shame, but there's a feeling of the gap between the emanator and the emanated.
But it doesn't feel it on its own account, because Bechina Aleph came from the emanator. The desire came from the emanator, whatever the created wanted. It didn't choose that. Bechina Dalet, it chooses to be the receiver. Where do I have the drawing here? Look. Bechina Aleph is Bechina Aleph receives from the Shoresh both the light and also the Kli. It says there in the preface, they come from the Shoresh in a compulsory, necessary manner. So there's no created being here, a created being who feels. Otherwise, what do we have? Right? Bechina Bet, it is already a response for the fact that the created being received fulfillment from the Creator, and it prefers to be as fulfillment compared to the feeling of the will to receive that is full. So what do we have in Bechina Bet here? We see how the Creator inserted these qualities into the created being. Bechina Bet is telling us that I prefer to resemble the Creator instead of being the receiver. Would you like to be that way? Yeah? Well?
Isn't that tzimtzum, restriction?
It's not restriction. No, there's nothing to restrict. Restriction is something I can do if it's my desire, that it comes from me. But if it doesn't come from me, how will I restrict it? I can only decide or replace also necessarily. I don't choose that yet. Seemingly the upper one who gives me these two things, he then compels me to choose one of them. Here there's no created being yet. It is just the influence from the Creator. It comes as light and it comes as Kli, and the two of them, in between the two of them, they establish a certain state. So, in Bechina Aleph, it was necessarily that the desire overcomes the fulfillment and it swallows up the fulfillment, and then having swallowed that up, it says that I prefer the fulfillment to the desire, because I want to resemble the fulfillment, and it becomes Bechina Bet. So, look how the Creator has inserted into the created being in this way this ability, this feeling that the fulfillment is higher than the desire. So already by that we can understand what will happen next, that it's going to work in this way, that the fulfillment will come and obligate the created being, and it can correct it, etc. And besides correcting it, when the fulfillment enters into the desire, it changes the desire. It transforms it to be like itself, like the fulfillment itself. And we see that as the result of Bechina Bet, that because in Bechina Aleph we have two forces that come from the Creator, the will to bestow and the will to receive. In the end, the will to bestow wins, and it forms Bechina Bet.